in the Tibetan tradition, Buddhist nuns were not able to become fully ordained bhikshunis, yet you were responsible for convening the first bhikshuni ordination of nuns in the Tibetan tradition here in Australia in 2003. How were you able to do that, and why did you do it?
Well, the Buddhist traditions of all kinds were introduced from basic Theravada to Mahayana, Vajrayana, complex empowerment systems in Tibet, but for somehow it is said the Bhikshuni tradition did not come to Tibet. So the current Tibetan Buddhist leadership, due to that as a reason, they say we can't have what we don't have. As of the wisdom of the old people who didn't have warrants, maybe Tibetans are not meant to have it. But I believe we are in a very pan-Buddhist, we're mixing with all Buddhists globally, and there are Buddhist tradition which has Bhikshuni traditions, and so therefore it's good to learn, introduce the Bhikkhuni ordination in Tibetan tradition, because other Buddhist tradition have it, so we should respect and not think whether they have their lineage, intact lineage or not. And so no Tibetan lamas or centers were willing to go out and do, because most teachers and traditions are very conservative and dare not to do. But in the West, the Buddhist scene and people who are following Buddhism, huge number of them are women, and for not having ordination makes them feel excluded or prejudiced. So a lot of Tibetan teachers themselves are quite willing to send their student to Taiwan or somewhere, but they're not quite wanting to do it. So therefore I thought it shouldn't be left like that. Someone got to start it. When Buddhism wasn't in Tibet, we introduced. Also why Bhikkhuni ordination was in Tibet, we can't introduce. Particularly we have other lineages, Vietnamese and Chinese Buddhist tradition there. It would in many ways also harmonize the workings of Buddhist schools together in this conflict-ridden era. And so I thought be bringing Chinese Mahayana Bhikkhuni lineage to Tibet would create a very good harmony, and not say that we follow only Indian Buddhism, but also lineages that are in China should be honored. So, and we did it. I asked His Eminence Choki Trichin Rinpoche, and he said, "Oh, if they have that lineage, it's good. Go and do it." He was very happy. He would have done it himself, but of course Rinpoche's age and situation didn't permit. So, having got permission from him, then I felt we should do it, and so we organized with the help of Venerable Thich Kongpa and his whole Vietnamese network of world senior Buddhist monks, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. So we gathered over 29 of such senior bhikkhus and bhikkhunis from Vietnam, from Germany, from USA, from Australia. And so they all came. So I tried to invite all the Tibetans, but none would come, or none accepted the invitation. But one Kagyu Lama called Dekun Rinpoche, he participated in that. So I know that it was possible to do, and we did it because there was a need for it, and there was a lineage that existed from the Dharma-gupta tradition, and so later, a couple of years later, they had a Bhikshuni conference in Hamburg University. They invited me, and I explained the situation and why the Tibetans are facing difficulties because they don't want to learn from other traditions, and for whatever reasons, which seems so un-Buddhist. When we have Buddhism not in Tibet, we got from India, why can't we get Buddhist lineages of Bhikkhuni ordination from the Chinese or whoever? So we did it, and So that was the reason why we did it, and nobody wrote to me to criticize or to do either, but not many Tibetans were willing to come or support or that, largely because geishas in Australia are usually restricted from going anywhere by the centrist policy or whatever, so I don't blame them. But generally Tibetan traditions probably have a lot too conservative and saying we are a form of complete Buddhism, but so why we need to learn anything from the others type of attitude. This is, I thought, was really not on, and we should bridge this gulf. So hopefully that at least historically been done, and these people are talking about it, how Bhikkhuni ordination can be brought into Tibetan Buddhism, and if some Tibetan Buddhist respected leaders were to look into that, at least it has been done before and it can be organized, so we can invite senior Bhikkhuni Sangha and Bhikkhu Sangha from Dharmagupta tradition and maybe translate the rituals in Tibetan and do it. It's all there. Just we have to learn to rejoice that they have and then receive it without thinking that we didn't have from India, so we won't have that thing. It seems like, why don't we throw the whole Buddhism? And that's the case, because we don't. But of course, that would be foolish to do. I believe that it needs to be done, and maybe I wasn't properly the position that I could do, but at least there are others who are willing to cooperate and assist, so the world is full of potential, so that's how it happened.
And how do you see the future of ordained Sangha, generally speaking, in the West?
Ordination of Sanghas in Tibet, when Buddhism came, it was tried on with the first 7 professional monks, and it did very well. And Buddhism, relatively young in the West, it doesn't have the royal patronage. It has this general feeling of not a religion but kind of a feeling in people's minds. So due to lack of huge royal or governmental support, the whole monk and nun thing would be still very individuals and their initiatives. There isn't a huge sort of communities putting support and creating causes and that. So it will always remain as a minority, but wherever Dharma spread, Sangha is essential. So maybe the form of ordination, the Theravadan style, is probably way to go. Maybe people can get temporary ordinations, study a few years, and maybe have a good establishment of support system. So once the Sangha generally grow, like lay men and lay women, the Buddhist number grows, I think the ordained monk and ordained nun community will naturally support it and understood. So I think it's just a question of time how well they will be. In a relatively last 50 years short history of Buddhism in the West, there's a lot of hundreds of ordained people. It's just that whether they have a good place and support system to encourage to study and retreat and practice support. So that will take time, how the community themselves grow. But generally it is very essential that the Sanghas, monks and nuns, are to be seen leading the Buddhist groups on top of however able lay teachers there may be. But most traditional Buddhists would see it's incomplete Buddhism if there are no monks and nuns. So it's almost like headless chook, really, without the Sangha. So we need to bring the try to establish Sangha just for the continuity and future direction. So I think it will grow in time.